Yeah, I wonder. Let me try something. Let me try a different background.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, we're actually recording now, so
Oh, okay.
no, we can just go with this.
Okay.
But no, it looks fine. It looks fine. Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas on Monday, January the 19th, and we're talking with our good friend Carlos Eire, Professor Carlos Eire, and also an author and great friend of our podcast. And we want to talk to Carlos today about the future of Cuba. Um, I'm going to go ahead and predict that the end is near. I know that's hard to predict sometimes, but I do think that, we may be getting close to that moment where a transition has to be created. So, first of all, Carlos, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always great to talk with you, Silvio.
Well, thank you so much. We have from time to time done some conversations about the future of Cuba, and I know one time one of your favorite lines was always that you weren't sure when they would come, but we are at that stage of deterioration. Toward the
Yeah.
signals, and I think we may be closer to even signals now because they don't seem to have anybody who can bail them out at this point. I think that's the most difficult thing. Obviously, the Soviet Union is not going to do it. China doesn't do it for free. Venezuela is not going to do it. Latin America cannot do it. And the European countries, I mean, he still owns them money. I mean, Cuba hasn't even paid back the loans. So it seems to me that it might be a good opportunity, Carlos, today to talk about a transition. What kind of a transition? And I like to use the example of 1898 when the Spanish American War ends. Cuba was devastated. The United States came in for a 4-year period, and then independence was given to Cuba. And I'd like to think that that's a good foundation. Maybe not something identical to that, Carlos, but something along those lines, because the United States is the only country that I can see playing a significant role in Cuba right now, Carlos.
Well, it is correct that there is no sugar daddy on the horizon for Cuba. That's for sure. And Russia is too busy
Right.
fighting in Ukraine and too devastated. I saw the estimates for casualties on the Russian side. It's just mind-boggling.
Right.
Thousands upon thousands. So that's not likely. Although they do have this deal going still, despite the Ukraine war, for encouraging Russians to visit Cuba over on the Russian side and giving them free vacations in Cuba, so-called free vacations. But I read some posts online from these Russian tourists that were just devastating. The tourist industry is in such a state of ruin that even Russians can't stand going there. Plus, it's like a 30-hour flight.
Right.
So forget it. And the Chinese gave up on Cuba a couple of years ago. You probably remember they had suggested market strategies that were more
right.
than communist, and they refused. Those dinosaurs refused it, and China said, "Okay, we'll pack up and leave," and they did. So
right. And also China has much. I mean, honestly, from China's perspective, not to cut you off, but I think from China's perspective, I think there are bigger and more important countries in Latin America. If you think of Venezuela, if you think of Brazil, those are more important countries for them, for their long-term interest. I mean,
right.
Cuba, as beautiful as it may be for you and me, and obviously as close to our hearts as it is, just doesn't have the same economic importance that a Brazil or a China or Venezuela would. So that's why the Chinese, I mean, look, they have bigger interest than Cuba,
yes,
I think.
They do, and they have massive problems in China that don't usually make it to the news outlets. But
in fact, one of them, financial. But I just read one again. I'm sorry to stop you, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just saw this. I mean, and that's why I wanted to get this in. In the last 30 or 40 minutes, I just saw that half of the population is disappearing
Yes.
because of their. I mean, so they're not reproducing, I guess, and
They're-
by the one baby policy or whatever it was.
Well, no, the
So
demographics are such that the one child policy was in place for I don't know how many decades, but it ended a while back. But what ended up as a result of the one child policy was that male births were 3 times greater in number than female births. So you have this huge generation of Chinese males who will never find mates. I've seen that. I've seen this attributed, the decline in population attributed to this.
Yes, so I've seen that too.
People
They're now all of a sudden looking for girls in Thailand or in wherever.
Yeah, well, there just aren't enough women because Chinese mothers were aborting the girls.
That's right.
And I had a student in my office years ago who told me that he was an only child, male, and that his mother had been forced to have several abortions by the government when they found out. She tried to hide the pregnancies, but the busybodies as always turned her in, and she had to have abortions. But anyway, yeah, Cuba has no place to turn. What puzzles me is, and I was just writing to somebody about this, ever since Fidel got ill and stepped down, this military junta that runs the place with, Raul was in fact in charge for a number of years. He's no longer completely in charge. It seems to run without a real head. Like, Diaz-Canel, he's not.
No, he's just a figurehead.
He's just a figurehead. And who else? These other ministers of this and ministers of that. It seems to be very, very good so far at keeping itself in power without a real head of state. And that puzzles me, which means that you can't go in like Trump did in Venezuela and take out the head, lop off the head. That won't work in Cuba. So what next? Oh, Lord. Yeah. Well, 1898, the Spanish were kicked out, but the Spanish, the War of Independence had devastated the country, as you point out. And, there had been all these concentration camps with General Weyler, and thousands of Cubans starved to death in these camps, but the countryside was devastated. And Cuba at that point didn't have much more than the sugar industry. I mean, yeah, that tobacco industry, that goes way back. Rum, cigars, sugar. But the U.S. steps in, and there's a very brief transition period, relatively brief when you consider that the U.S. acquired Cuba in 1898, and it became independent in May of 1902. But I see that there's a similarity, perhaps, also in this situation. The republic that was established, very, very politically immature, as one would expect, right? Because not only the War of Independence, they had all the usual fractures and disagreeing parties within it, but also the very first president, Tomás Estrada Palma, had spent a huge part of his adult life here in the United States in exile.
He was a dual citizen, as I understand. He was an American citizen. Yeah.
I
remember reading that.
He was in upstate New York.
Right. In fact, they have a highway. Did you know that?
No.
There's a highway, and one of his, I don't know if it's his grandson or great grandson, one time I met him through Facebook, and I looked at his name and I said, you're Cuban with that name. Is there a reason? And he said,
Wow,
well, my great grandfather, I guess,
wow,
was the first one. And so we chatted one time about that. And there is a portion of a highway somewhere in New York
I'll
where
have to look
it's
this up.
called, named after him. I'm not saying the entire highway, but like
Right.
a portion of the highway, because he did live up there. And I guess that was, and that's why I learned that he was an American citizen, that he was, I guess, dual citizenship. We would call him today a Cuban American.
Well, he was one of the original Cuban Americans.
He was the first ones, yeah.
And the I see a parallel there in that yes, if nobody else can help rebuild Cuba, and it seems obvious the Europeans are not going to do it, or the Chinese or the Russians, Cuba needs rebuilding from top to bottom, from end to end, including the very, very sad fact that this will be different this time, the transition, because the countryside could be brought back into production very quickly in 1898. This will not be the case nowadays because so much land has gone into disuse, has been taken over by this invasive weed. And it's going to take at least a decade or longer to get sugar production back up. Mm-hmm. And that's, let's go from 1902, add 10 years, 1912. Right after that, Cuba, because of World War I, becomes a booming economy because the Europeans need sugar. They can't have the beet sugar they were used to. So the dance of the millions, La Danza de los Millones, begins in Cuba, right? First World War, not long after independence. Mm-hmm. And that's when Cuba received basically from that time on to the 1950s, over 1 million immigrants, mostly from Spain.
Yeah, and you wrote an article about this, and I wanted I know that was over in Babalu, and I think that link was lost. Yeah. But do you have that link somewhere? Because I wanted to share that information with some friends. But the link that, of course, we knew from Babalu is no longer available. But I think this is an amazing statistic, and I like you to talk about that a little bit, because this is one of those great. I didn't know that, even though I should have known that, because my mother's father came to Cuba during that time. So my mother's father was one of those. My grandfather, on my mother's side, was one of those Spaniards that you write about in your article. And I wonder if you could maybe tell us that story a little bit, because it is really an amazing story of how Cuba all of a sudden was being flooded by immigrants from not just Spain, but from Europe. They were Jewish immigrants. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. So just share that with us, and because I think it's an amazing story.
And something similar could happen in a transition period now in the 21st century. Something very similar can happen, because the fact is, between 1900 and 1958, over 1 million people flooded Cuba, which in 1900, the population was only 3 million. So imagine that, 3 million, and then 1 million flood in.
Right. That reproduced. I mean, that's how my mother happened.
Yes, yeah.
And my mother and my aunt. So you have,
many were large families too.
Yes.
They had that. So it actually literally changed the demographics of Cuba, because of the number of, those 3 million in 1900, a huge percentage were the recently freed slaves, blacks. And most of these immigrants came from Spain and the Middle East. Mm-hmm. We had Chinese immigrants.
Right.
We had Lebanese, Syrian immigrants, Jewish.
I have some of those. Yeah, I have some of those in my family. My it's funny because my family fits your story. My mother's sister, her only sister, my aunt, married a Lebanese who came to Cuba as a baby and grew up in Cuba. So that story touches me. The number of Lebanese people who were in Cuba. My uncle was
Right.
Lebanese. My cousins are part Lebanese.
Yeah.
So
And
that's just an amazing story.
it is. And the same thing might happen again in a transition period
Yes.
with another very different wrinkle, which is that right now I have not seen any fixed statistic on how many Cubans are in exile. But if I do my math, and I'm not very good at math, if I do my math correctly from newspaper articles I read, something like 1.5 million came during Biden, not to the United States, but
Who left? Yeah.
1.5 million left. And there are a lot in Spain now, a lot of Cubans
Yes,
in
they are.
Spain, and in Latin America, there are a lot of Cubans.
Yes.
So anyway, 1.5 million who left recently, and another 1.5 million already established here in the US. That's 3 million.
Right.
And the population now of Cuba is somewhere around 10 million.
Right.
So not everybody's going to go back from exile, but a good number. The more recent the arrival, the more likely it is that they will want to go back.
But one thing, Carlos, if I may jump in, they're not going to physically go back. Like, for example, I'm not moving back because my
Right.
life is up here now. But I'm going to do whatever I can to contribute.
Right.
And even just taking one trip to Cuba is sources of cash that they
Right.
don't have now.
Right.
So I do expect the Cubans of my generation, our generation, who came here as kids and grew up in the United States, we have not lost our love for Cuba or our willingness to help Cuba, because I think we're still close enough to Cuba. It's not like it's been 5 generations. It's only really been 1 generation, and I think so. That's why I'll do whatever I can.
Well,
heck, I'll do a podcast from Havana and have you as a guest.
Great, wonderful. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I can't
that's
wait
right.
because there will be people here in exile, Cubans in exile, who have done well here, who can invest, become entrepreneurs.
Sure.
But the heavy lifting has to be done by some major contributor,
sure,
like the U.S., major power, because everything has to be rebuilt from the bottom up, except for the hotels. That's the only thing they've taken care of. So if the U.S. steps in, yes, there will be. This is inevitable. If the military junta collapses, and then no one can predict how that would happen, whether it's a popular uprising or just the fact that they just give up and move into exile with all their money, just to escape with their skins and their money. It could be very chaotic, extremely chaotic.
Right.
And the U.S. would come in and do what? I mean, what's happening in Venezuela now is, to me, it's very unnerving. That Maduro was taken out, and now, wait a minute, this woman who's in charge now, she was even more of a rabid communist.
Yeah, she was the vice president to Maduro, right?
Right, yeah, she was.
Yeah.
But, Trump has left her in place, and I've read that the strategy is not to make the same mistake that the U.S. made in Iraq, when they just decimated the Ba'ath Party.
Right.
And removed all the people who knew how to run the place. So there will be.
That's the idea. I mean, President Trump mentioned that the other day, that he remembers Iraq, but the one thing though, and if I may just go back to a point you made of how devastated the country is, back in 1898, I mean, Spain was not anti-capitalism.
No,
they were just a colonial power.
Yeah.
So, now what you have is this anti-capitalism that has dominated Cuba for so long, that has destroyed private property. I mean, in 1898, I would assume that there were many private companies in Cuba, restaurants, but they were private. You don't have that now, except the ones that the government runs. So I think the situation now is perhaps even more devastating.
Well,
the more
of course,
I think about
there's been a complete, and by complete I mean 100% takeover of the real estate,
yes,
as well as of the businesses, and it's the privileged class there. If the military junta collapses, you do have this. It's not immense, this ruling class. We're talking about only thousands of people, or maybe hundreds of thousands, that's it, who are now running the place in one way or another. Are they all anti-capitalist? I don't think so. But the thing is that everyone on that island who is younger than I am
or me,
has never lived under anything other than this hardline communist, Marxist, Leninist economy, which the state runs everything, owns everything. So what will happen could be very chaotic. And I know that there are people, Cubans in exile, even though they're the children and grandchildren of the original owners, they'll go back and try to reclaim what was theirs. And that's going to become very, very messy.
So that's where the United States would have to step in and stop that, because
Yes.
so that's what I'm saying. Somebody has to be the policeman, I guess, and control the traffic.
And preferably not the people who are the policemen now.
No.
That's so.
Yeah, I know.
It has to be very, very. But what I don't know, and I don't know because I don't spend time looking up information, whether any of the individuals, let's say in the State Department here in the United States, or any other department of the federal government, is working on a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a plan? One would think with Marco Rubio as Secretary of State that there might be a plan.
Or at least they're talking about it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So one would hope
that,
should something happen suddenly, there is some kind of plan in place. Because in Venezuela, there doesn't seem to be. That's what I find it unnerving, is that they took out Maduro, and maybe what's happening is the plan.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. When I talk to people from Venezuela here in the area, they're not upset with what Trump did. No. In other words, they somehow they're giving Trump the benefit of the doubt here.
For now.
And I guess I will do the same for now.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is Secretary Rubio, really, who I think is running this phase of the policy. But I just, it is just remarkable to me, this group of people. You see them in pictures. The other day they had a little video when they brought back these, I guess, the remains of those 32 Cubans who were killed in Venezuela. And you see this group of people, the leadership, and I mean, it's like they're very old. I mean, when they're older than you and me, they're pretty old.
No, they are.
I mean, these guys were like in their 20s. I mean, you and I were like boys. These guys were like, in their 20s when they came in. And I look at them and I say, man, that is not a very inspiring group of people.
No, and not only that, they don't know how to fix things.
Right. Well,
they don't want to fix things, but on top of that, they don't have the know-how that good capitalist investors would go in. But the problem is, who owns what?
Right.
How do you restart all this? I'm not well versed enough in economics to know how you transition from a communist economy of this sort to a capitalist economy. What happened in Russia was it's to a large extent that those who were in charge just became capitalists.
Right.
I don't want that to happen in Cuba.
Right. But here's the interesting thing. I was thinking of an example of what could happen in Cuba, an idea. And I'm thinking of what happened in Baltimore, Maryland, when I was going to school up in that area, that the mayor came in. This was like in the 70s. He came in and the entire downtown area was devastated. There was nothing.
Right. Oh, empty
house. Yeah, you remember that. Empty houses, these condominiums and townhouses of 50 years before. There was just everything was empty, devastated. I remember, in fact, walking with my father one time to the Inner Harbor, and it's like we felt like there had been a bombing of I mean, it was devastated. Everything was devastated. So the mayor came up with an idea, which was brilliant. He says, you can buy the property for $1, but you've got to commit yourself to living in the property, upgrade it, and you cannot sell it right away. You have to live there. So, you know, the idea was pretty radical, but then within 10 years, that entire Inner Harbor area was developed. It was actually gorgeous now. You had these townhomes, you had the Inner Harbor, you had new buildings, you had lots of things that were going on. And I'm thinking something like that could be tried in Cuba. So if you were the owner of a building that they confiscated from you, they can sell it to you for $1 or something nominal, and then you can commit yourself to rebuilding it. And the same with all those homes in Cuba. So, it seems to me that capitalism always works if you try something capitalistic,
Oh yeah.
And
it can happen. It can definitely happen. But right now at this point, the future is very cloudy in the sense, not in a negative sense that, good things can't happen, but we just don't know. We don't know. And for people like you and me, our age, right? It will be nice to see the regime come tumbling down and to watch what happens.
Right. Well, I guess
I'm not moving back. Like you said.
No, I mean, there's no reason to. I mean, everything is here, but that doesn't mean we cannot help. But look, I've kind of moved away a little bit. I think maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I wanted to see each one of them, hung from a tree or something, But now I'm more interested in the future. And I'm not really interested in a bloodbath. By the way, we're getting a question from one of our listeners that asking if you're Cuban too. And I said, yes, he's 100% Cuban. Similar to my story. We both came here when we were kids, although your story is more interesting, I think, perhaps because you were one of the original kids, part of that 14,000 group, Pedro Pan group that came here without your parents, and eventually wrote a book about that. And I think many of the people who follow us know it, but obviously one listener didn't. But anyway, I'm over that stage where I want vengeance. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but
oh no, you are. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what is the point of hanging a bunch of these old men from a tree in Cuba? What is that going to solve? Just get them out of the way, send them to Russia, and stop the bloodbath. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Spain will take them in.
Probably.
They probably all have bank accounts in Europe already anyway.
Right.
They're pretty well set. This company Gaesa, the state monopoly that controls everything, they have billions stashed away in Europe. It's in the name of Gaesa, but who really is Gaesa? It's these people. It's these people you saw welcoming the coffins of the Cubans killed in Venezuela. And
right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they'll take them. I mean, they got the money already there, so all they got to do is change their address. And many of them are not going to be around in 10 years. By the pictures I saw, many of those guys are not going to be around in 10 years.
No. The dinosaurs, their days are definitely
that's right.
Counted in perhaps one hand, many of them.
Right. Well, Carlos, we're just about out of time, but I'm hoping you promise me that we will do some of these follow-ups over the next few months, because I just think that change is coming.
Yeah. As things develop, it'll be fun and useful, right? To think about, speculate, and perhaps come up with ideas that can be passed on to people who could do something if there is a transition.
Right. No, and there has to be a transition of some type. The question is, whether it'll be like 1898 when the United States basically stepped in. Now, let me ask you a question, a historical question about that. When the U.S. was in during that 4-year period, was Cuba formally a U.S. territory, or was it just
like Puerto Rico?
Okay, so it was a U.S. territory, and then it was given its independence or the opportunity for independence later. Okay, all right.
Yes, and then
so it
there's
was like Puerto Rico. Okay,
the famous or infamous Platt Amendment,
right,
to the Cuban Constitution that allowed the U.S. to intervene if things were not going the right way.
right.
Well, I think something like that would be necessary. I often wonder, what would have happened if Cuba had remained like Puerto Rico, a commonwealth of the United States. What difference would that have made? I don't know. But for all intents and purposes, for all of the propaganda the revolution puts out that Cuba was an American colony, right, that was not really independent, they call it a pseudo-republic. Right? No, Cuba was independent. And actually, that was one of the biggest problems we had, was that we're politically immature as a culture. And we had, one bad president after another and actually the man who did the most to bring Cuba up physically, was Machado, who built the Capitol building, the Carretera Central, the highway from one end to the other, and many, many other things that can be attributed to Machado, but the man was despised by many because he was a dictator. My father relayed a story to me once that he met Machado at some function and refused to shake his hand. An act of valor, but good Lord,
he was eventually overthrown in 1933, right, Machado?
Yes. I don't know the year, but he was overthrown.
And that's when Batista came into the national picture, kind of.
Wasn't he? His first time he was elected.
That's right.
His first presidency, he was elected. So
no, he actually, if you look at his economic record, Cuba did quite well.
Oh, gosh,
when Batista was president. It's just unfortunate that things turned out the way they did.
I never got to travel outside Havana.
Yes.
Before I came to the U.S., so all I know is Havana. So I obsess. It's one of my obsessions. I like to look at maps of Havana and trace the development of the city from 1900 to 1958. And if you look any map of present day Havana, most of it was built in this time period.
Yeah. What I remember La Carretera Central because we lived in the interior. So we had to take that highway that basically connected the country. I remember that. I remember some of the trains. And what I remember with towns like Ciego de Ávila and Sabana Grande, my mother is from Ciego de Ávila, my father is from Sabana Grande. And I remember that those were pretty well-developed towns.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, they all had water infrastructure, electricity that worked, telephone that worked. One of my most interesting stories was watching my mom, this would have been 1958 or 59, picking up the phone in Havana and calling her sister in Ciego de Ávila by phone.
Well, of course, yeah.
And I was in Mexico in 1982 trying to make a phone call from, and I don't want to upset any Mexican friends, but I was trying to make a phone call from Mexico City to Monterrey in 1982, and there were all kinds of technical problems with the line. And, that kind of stuff didn't happen in Cuba.
It's just amazing. And if any of our, our listeners want to do this, it's just to look at a map of Havana and realize that just most of it is post 1900.
Right.
But prior, nothing new has been built.
That's right.
Since 59. No, there are no huge developments. They built some Soviet-style apartment blocks east of Havana and other places, but for the most part, no. And this is what will need to be fixed. And
Everything will have to be fixed. And sometimes, I remember the tunnel that went under the harbor in Havana, being in that tunnel a few times. And I always think about that. Gee, have they upkept that? Because they don't keep up anything else.
Oh, there was a problem a few months ago
with it.
A kind of cave-in, partial cave-in, and it was shut down for I don't know how many days. But yeah, it's the infrastructure is it's gone.
Look at the power plants.
There's no water.
Right.
There's no safe delivery of potable water. There's no electricity. There's no gas. There's no propane. There's no gasoline. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Actually, I thought about this the other day.
Yeah.
If I were living there, I tried to imagine myself living there. What would happen?
Right.
Without electricity? Well, of course, no lights, no communication, no fans, no air conditioning, nothing. But worst of all, you cannot refrigerate food.
Right.
And food is scarce to begin with.
Right.
So my question to myself was, how much time would I have to spend scrounging for something edible that will not decompose or rot away or, turn sour?
Well, you have to, I guess, whatever you're going to eat, you have to get it today and eat it.
That's right.
Because almost like in the old days, when you went out and hunted, you hunted something and then you ate it that day,
Yeah. And you cook it over charcoal,
right,
or coal, or wood, and that's what people are doing.
Exactly right. No, you're right. It is devastating what those people have done to Cuba. I mean, for anybody who had the least knowledge of the country, I think I may have told you this story on one of our Pride podcasts, that for a while there, I kept running into people in the United States, couples of my dad's parents' generation, who whenever they learned that I was from Cuba, they go, "Oh, we went there for our honeymoon."
Yes, yeah.
And this was like people in the 50s, I guess.
Yes.
And these, "Oh, I loved Havana. I loved how everything was so clean, everything." And it's like, I always think that that's what they've destroyed. And I guess if I was king for a day, Carlos, I would not only rebuild Cuba like this, but I would destroy the Godfather 2 movie, because that movie did more harm to the Cuban story. What they sold in that movie was just a total lie. And people, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times people will ask me and something like, "Did your parents run to the water to get their boat out of Cuba?" And I said, "No, my parents were sleeping when all of this happened." So it's like, gosh, that movie did more harm to Cuba than
it did. There was only one thing there, one brief scene that I thought, when I first saw it for the first time, I said, "Oh my God, they got it right. They got it right." It was people destroying parking meters.
Yes, that's true. That did happen. I remember that. Yeah,
because parking meters were very unpopular.
Right.
And I still remember there was a show on Friday nights on TV, forget what it was called, where it was a live TV show where they had contests. And one night the contest was the first person that brings in a parking meter will give you, I don't know how many pesos.
That's pretty good. That sounds like Cuban humor.
Well, yeah. And then some guy ran in with the parking meter and they gave him some pesos. For all we know, it was somebody who worked for the TV station.
Right. Yeah. The whole thing was planned. Yeah.
The whole thing.
No, but you're right. That did happen. But other than that, I mean, at least from memories of my parents and what I can remember, I was 6+ when on January 1st, 1959, I was 6.5. So my memory is of that. What a 6.5-year-old can. I think you were what, 8?
I had just turned 8.
8. Okay, so you and I had similar memories. But you got to see Castro in a tank, and I never did.
Yeah, well, I was there,
right,
but I didn't get to see him. The tank went by. I was busy looking at other stuff. The tank went by so fast, I didn't get to see him. But I saw him later. I saw him later when Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin.
Yuri Gagarin,
yes. And I went with my grandfather to the so-called Plaza de Revolución,
Right.
which was actually La Plaza Martí before.
That's right. Before that, yeah.
Anyway, I saw Fidel giving a speech from must have been like a half a mile away. He was a tiny little dot off in the distance, but they had loudspeakers everywhere.
Right, right.
And
yeah,
actually,
for miles you could hear them, because I remember those speeches. That street, I think it's called Paseo, that goes all the way down. That street, I remember, or either Linea or Paseo. I don't remember what street that was. And that there were people like several miles away listening to speakers. I remember that.
They had loudspeakers on the corner by my grandparents' building, and they lived like maybe a mile away.
Right.
And
those were memories that we will never forget. But Carlos, I want to thank you for your time, your very valuable time. Thank you for giving it to us. And your book, Waiting for Snow in Havana, is the name of your book that was very popular. And maybe we're finally going to get snow in Havana, Carlos, with the change.
They had snow in North Florida.
That's what I mean. So maybe there'll be a little bit of snow in Havana one day, and then that way. But waiting for snow in Havana. If anybody wants to read a really interesting memoir about Cuba and leaving Cuba, it's probably the best one ever written, Carlos.
Well, if I ever go back, I think I will bring a cooler full of snow.
Right. And then you can say, see, my prediction came true. I brought the snow. You don't have to wait for it. I brought the snow.
Yes.
But it's a great book. It's a great book and much celebrated book, Waiting for Snow in Havana. We recommend the book to everybody. You go into a lot of detail about those early days of Cuba. Carlos, have a great day. Thank you for your time. And again, I may call on you here a few more times over the next few weeks, maybe a few months, as we go through this turmoil.
Anytime. And maybe we
thank
could
you
have
so much, our good friend. I hope so. I'll bring the wine.
I'll have to
All right. Oops, I just lost you there for a minute. Say it again. I'm sorry.
Well, if you
go ahead and say it again. You bring the wine, and you bring.
I'll have to bring my own because I'm 2,000 miles away.
We'll do it that way.
Okay.
Well, that's true. That's true. All right. We'll see you later, Carlos. Thank you for your time. All right. Our good friend, Carlos Eire, professor and at the same time author of that great book, Waiting for Snow in Havana. We met each other through the Babalu blog, one of those great memories of the past. And always loved talking to him about Cuba. He knows a great deal and has great vision. And a change is coming in Cuba. I do believe that. And this transition that we were talking about is extremely important. You know, there's that 1898 transition from Spain to the United States to Cuba, which I think might be some lessons from that period of time. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.